Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim, and Chris. On today's Roland Garros Day 13 catch-up,
Cobolli threw as Arnaldi withdraws with a viral illness.
Zverev moves one step closer to maiden Grand Slam title.
And we previewed the final as a new Slam champion will be crowned in Paris.
Chris, today is the 5th of June, and we are here to catch up on Roland Garros Day 13 at Tennis Weekly HQ. On today's episode, we're going to be looking back on men's semi-finals action. We're going to be looking at the men's final, Zverev versus Cobolli, making some predictions. Chris, we're going to get your views as well on the women's final tomorrow, but we're just going to get straight into it because the last couple of hours have just been pure chaos, I feel, at Roland Garros. It's been a tournament of lots of unexpected, strange, surprising things happening, but this might take the cake. Matteo Arnaldi has withdrawn from the second semi-final against Flavio Cobolli. He was on site and decided, nah, I am not fit enough to play. He cited a viral illness, did a press conference in front of a packed crowd, including Cobolli himself. I mean, yeah, it's been a very strange series of incidents.
I don't really know what to make of it. I think this is unprecedented, even in the most.
I feel like we're going to be ending up talking about this longer than the Zverev Mensik match.
Yeah, we're not here to catch up on the tennis that did happen. We're here to catch up on the tennis that didn't happen today. Very shocking scenes. I think it's a big shame. Firstly, we should make it very clear. You really don't want anyone to be in this situation where they've made like a maiden Grand Slam semi-final and they can't take to the court. So that is devastating for Arnaldi. And I mean, it's such a big opportunity. So if he could or felt like he could play it, I'm sure he would have tried. You have to assume that. But I mean, I have questions, Joel. I have many questions.
Well, before we get into the questions, I will read what Matteo Arnaldi said in his press conference. He said, "It's difficult to be here. Last night, I started to not feel well. Yesterday was fine, but I had dinner. I didn't digest well. I started vomiting at 1 a.m., at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. I started vomiting again. It was pretty bad. I was hoping it would be from dinner or something, but throughout the day, I couldn't eat. I just kept going to the bathroom." So that was his version of events. And then we got the official version or announcement to all the fans and spectators on Philippe Chatrier, and they announced it officially as a viral illness.
Well, they might. The audience might be going viral with a viral infection of something.
So on the screen inside Philippe Chatrier, it said, "We regret to announce that due to a viral illness, Italian player Matteo Arnaldi has been forced to withdraw from his semi-final match against Flavio Cobolli. All spectators holding a ticket for the second men's single semi-final will receive a full refund." And it goes on to say, actually, I quite like this, was quite a nice touch, which, again, is a question for me. Flavio Cobolli will practice at 7:15 p.m. on Philippe Chatrier, and this practice session will be open to the public. So, yeah, we had the statement from Roland Garros. We had the statement as well from Arnaldi. I mean, let's start with what the player was saying and where he was saying it, because I think the context of where he was saying it was almost as surprising as what he was saying as well.
It really was. And I mean, I don't think I've ever seen this before, that a joint press conference. That's something very, very unusual.
Oh, I even forgot about that. Yeah, he was sitting at the table either side of like the center bit with Cobolli on the left and Arnaldi on the right.
So he's in the same room as his friend, his countryman, and now the finalist of Roland Garros, whilst he is telling the members of the media that he has a viral illness. That to me is concerning. Yes. I don't really understand what's gone on here as to who would end up greenlighting this, that they think this is a good idea from his camp, from their camp, from the tournament's camp. I do not understand, because that seems very concerning. I don't think I've ever seen a joint press conference before for something like this. In fact, I was thinking more, Joel, if someone is withdrawing with an illness, a viral illness, it probably falls more into like the COVID side of things where, you don't have a press conference, you stay
Mm.
away from other people. And
Mm.
I guess that's my big question here is, you know, how on earth did we end up here, and why? I do understand, of course, I understand that, if you are unwell and you think there's a chance, a possibility you can play, coming to the site does make sense. Seeing if you can hit, he wasn't able to hit. Okay, fine. But you don't then spend time with the person who you would most want to not spend time with and is most at risk for the tournament, because the tournament doesn't want them in the same room together, surely. They're sort of socially distanced, we should say. There's like, normally there's the Perrier bottle either side. They are way out from that. And in the middle, I have to say, it's my
It's still
favorite
taking
image.
a chance, though.
It is taking a
Still
chance.
taking a chance.
But it's my favorite image because it says only at Roland Garros is what it says under the desk. And this is so
That
true.
feels meme. It feels meme worthy, doesn't it?
It's a meme. The whole of Roland Garros this year is a meme, Joel. I think we have to just agree that that is the case. But I mean, aside from the obvious like ridiculousness of the fact that they're in the same room together, I do have question marks around how sick he is. And if it is like, is it a viral illness? Has he been diagnosed with that? It does sound a lot like food poisoning, if I'm completely honest. I'm also not a doctor. That was the first question that was asked. And he said he thought it was a viral illness because he had a temperature. And I'm like, well, you can have a temperature from food poisoning. So that's one question that I don't think we have an answer to. But then the other side of it is, if you are so sick, I don't really expect you to be able to get yourself out of bed, get yourself
Yes.
on site, walk onto site, potentially try and practice. He didn't end up practicing, I don't think. Then get yourself to press, hold a press conference. That's a long time he spent up at Roland Garros. And I don't know anyone who's been like very sick with flu who's been able to get out of bed. That is what happens when you have the flu.
I can only think perhaps that he would have felt so desperate to play this match. I mean, he might never be in a Grand Slam semi-final again. This might be his one moment. So I can only think that his desperation to play and to play his fellow countrymen as well, I think perhaps motivated him to go to the site and maybe hope that he would feel better. But having said that, I am with you. I'm a bit surprised if he has no energy, if he's not feeling great, then how has he even made it to the site in the first place?
Even holding his head up, like when you're really sick.
He gave a cheeky smile actually when he came out of his car on the socials.
I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt because he was also smiling throughout this press conference. But I think sometimes people do that in uncomfortable or awkward situations, and people respond.
Maybe he didn't want to
differently.
give the game away.
Well, I mean, he certainly did a good job covering it on his way in, that's for sure. But I guess my question is, should he have taken to the court or tried to, is a question I have, because I don't think that it's wrong to be selfish at a Grand Slam when, as you said, it is a semi-final. I also do understand that if you're well aware that you wouldn't even be able to do anything on the court, it's not worth going on the court. Fully understand that. But I guess it's the case of we are in this weird space of the tournament will have to refund a lot of money. Like they probably would rather you did try. At the same time, it's strange that you're on site and not going on court. We've seen people withdraw in different circumstances. We've seen people withdraw from Grand Slam finals before with stomach illnesses. I think we've had that with, Justine Henin against Amelie Mauresmo in a final before. I guess that's something where, only he will know, and we cannot obviously judge him for withdrawing, but it does feel like a player like Arnaldi might not get opportunities like this. So you are given license to go on court and not be able to play. I feel personally that is your prerogative if you wish to, because you've got yourself in this scenario. This is your right to play irrespective of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it reminds me actually of when Sinner faced Alcaraz last year. Was it in Cincinnati?
Yes, it was Cincinnati.
One of the American events, and it was quite clear that he wasn't physically 100%, but gave it a good go before retiring. And with this matchup, personally, I would have liked to have seen Arnaldi take to the court. And I think if you've got enough energy to get to the site itself, then I think you've got enough energy at least to try and play. And I guess maybe it was in his mindset that, if I go on the court and I'm not playing 100%, that's not a memory or an experience I want to attach to my, Grand Slam semi-final moment. It might kind of dirty that moment or be attached to kind of negative experiences. Whereas maybe from his perspective, not stepping on the court and just giving the press conference with his friend, with Cobolli, was arguably the best situation he could have made out of a really bad moment for him.
I do understand that. I think that's a good point about, Sinner. They played, I think it was 20.
Because imagine if he had stepped on the court and he just lost the set, like 6-love, didn't win any points. He was looking around. You would have felt like, I don't know, the stadium wanted to swallow him up. It would have felt even worse.
Potentially, but I think that's the point. Champions like Sinner, he played 29 points, but he tried. You know what I mean? He really did. And he was 5-love down. It was clearly not a good match. It was no contest, and he would have known it was very unlikely. But champions try, and sometimes champions can push through. And I would kind of point to an example. I'm not saying that Arnaldi could have won a best of 5 set match, because that is not probably the case. I also think, Sinner wasn't even able to play more than 5 games, but he still took to the court, And I think people understand that. They appreciate the fact that someone is that driven to try. Like Serena Williams was in the semi-finals of the French Open in 2015. She was very unwell. She had a fever. I think it was like over 101. She really was not doing well. She was breathing very heavily. She'd had flu that week, and she actually didn't even do a press conference afterwards. She did come through that match against Baczynski, 4-6, 6-3, 6-love, and she was fetal in the locker room when her team found her. She'd been there for 45 minutes. She really put everything out there to try and get through, to get into this, into the next stage of a Grand Slam. So I'm not saying that everyone has that drive or desire. I'm not saying it would have been pretty. I think it could have been 2 games. It could have been awful, but at the same time,
just give us something.
Yeah, and
just
again,
give us a little bit.
It is his prerogative to pull out, and we aren't saying he made the wrong decision for him. We aren't, and that's clear. But I mean, it is quite unprecedented, and unprecedented to then do a press conference with a viral illness with your finalist. It's not unprecedented, the actual withdrawal of the semi-final.
It's the 3rd time since the start of the Open era a player has been forced to withdraw in the semi-finals of a Grand Slam tournament. Famously, Rafael Nadal did it against Nick Kyrgios, Wimbledon 2022, and also Richard Krajicek at the Australian Open 1992 against Jim Courier. So yeah, it's not unprecedented. It's just very surprising and a very rare occurrence, and I think that's why, again, I think a lot of fans would have just liked to see him step on the court. But just talking about the press conference itself, if you were in Amarlie Mauresmo's shoes and you could change the situation, or how would you have handled the situation? Would you have told Arnaldi to be like, look, you're sick, don't do the press conference. If you really want to do it, you can do it virtually or in a room with no one. How would you have handled the situation?
I mean, they have had press conferences previously when someone is pulled out for flu. I mean, Rebecca pulled out with an upper respiratory infection. She said that she had a fever. And she did a press conference in, I think that was 2023. So clearly, there is a media commitment that the French Open like their players to stick to. Players don't always do that. And I think that's the case, is that you don't have to do it. I mean, if you are medically incapable of doing it, that is okay. I mean, Novak Djokovic, he pulled out against Casper Ruud in the quarterfinals prior to that match happening. He did not do a press conference. They released a statement. With Wimbledon, with COVID-19 withdrawals, you are not doing a press conference. It's a statement. And I think that's what would have been appropriate. And I think the last thing that I would have done would be to allow Flavio Cobolli to be anywhere near him, because you have a final, and at the moment you've lost the money, like a lot of money, like 15,000 euros worth of tickets at least, if not more, plus the television advertising. That's a huge amount of money to lose, but a final would be even worse, and that's in 2 days. And these sorts of infections can come on, and if they've had contact throughout the week, you don't know what's going on now, and this is a really high risk scenario. So I would have avoided this at all costs, and I think that's what's so confusing, is that Cobolli's being very sweet and saying he almost cried when he was told. And I'm like, there's a lot of
I
love
think he was
between.
blinded by kind of the camaraderie and the
It was a very emotional scene.
Italian element
Closeness,
of the
yeah.
semi-final, because you just can't imagine something like this happening with I mean
Marta
I use
Kostyuk
the
and Sabalenka.
yeah
Like,
Nadal and Kyrgios, like I
yes.
just can't, you just can't imagine it. Do you think that kind of has sort of complicated the situation a little bit more?
I mean, I think emotions and feelings have got in the way of common sense.
Mm.
You know, you don't need, there's no requirement for Cobolli to do a press conference with Arnaldi about a semi-final that didn't happen. You have a pre-final tournament responsibility. And if they wanted him on site to do a press conference, he could do one. But this is not a media requirement for him. So in his camp, that's some serious error of judgment. You have to hope that Arnaldi's diagnosed himself wrong and that it isn't what we think it is. Because then we have a much bigger problem on our hands. So I guess that's one where I can't really fathom what's gone on. And I think it's one where hopefully lessons will be learned and we don't have stronger repercussions when the final comes round. I hope that, Cobolli's feeling fit as a fiddle, and I hope Arnaldi can, not have that on his conscience, as well as the fact that he obviously didn't take to the court.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting on social media, the conspiracy theorists are also out wondering around that sort of all Italian element, and whether this is like them scheming kind of project take down Sasha Zverev. And
do you think that's the Italian agenda? Well,
yeah, and Cobolli is basically the best chance at doing that.
I mean,
is that a stretch too far? I think so.
Of course it is. I think in my mind, it's much more to do with, the Italian tennis community. I think they do have a closeness. It is almost like a team sport when you see them celebrating with each other, behind the wings. So I think it comes from that side of things that they are trying to be, united and support each other. And I think that can go too far, like today. And you just have to hope that, everyone is okay. It doesn't end up being worse. Yeah. And Arnaldi gets an opportunity to play a semi-final in the future. But, I mean, Joel, what will happen next? I mean, I'm just thinking, like, will Wimbledon have these sorts of things, or are we getting them all out the way? Please, all of them out of the way for Roland Garros.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I feel like it's an inevitability of a tour with, loads of people moving across the world. It can lead to these sorts of things.
People getting sick. But I was going to say this as well. Have the players lost a little bit of that? I guess sensibilities around, everyone's taking selfies, they're signing things, they really are exposing themselves. They're going to restaurants. You are putting yourself at risk a lot more than I think makes sense. So I'm not saying that everyone has to be on lockdown, but I think you have to make sensible decisions generally in terms of who you come into contact with. And I'm not sure that everyone is remembering, what happened recently. I
mean, the final thing I would say is I just don't think the press conference should have taken place at all. I think
I didn't ask that question. Sorry, I assumed you were in agreement. Yes.
Yeah, I think it was done in
you
the wrong
said,
way.
I think it should have taken place. I would have been like, what is going on?
I don't think I think I don't think it should have happened. If he was ill, I don't think there should have been a media requirement for him to do that if there was one. I get that he was on site, and I get that it was probably just a corridor away for him to go into a room, but to go in a room with 50 other people, including the opponent who's going to be in the Grand Slam final, I'm not. You were a journalist, sure.
Joel. I mean, if we were in the room, thank goodness I left Paris sooner. I've got my health to protect. I've got a podcast, Joel.
But I'm not quite sure Amelie Mauresmo would have wanted that. She's already lost a match in the night session, which has probably cost her. Well, it's cost her refunds for all the fans and the spectators. It's probably got the TV providers angry as well. So she was probably thinking, I need to protect Cobolli at all costs here. What's going on with this?
Or at least a mask or something, please.
Right, we're going to take a quick break now. Do join us in the second half, where we will be discussing the first men's match between Zverev and Mensik in the semi-finals. Plus, we will look ahead to day 14 with ladies' finals action between Mira Andreeva and Maya Holinska, and we'll also be previewing the men's final. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, and it's time now to look back on the first match of the day.
The only match.
The only match of the day, the only completed match of the day in the men's semi-finals, and that was Alexander Zverev versus Jakub Mensik. Zverev coming through in 4 sets, had a little bit of a wobble in that third set, but came through 7-5, 6-2, 3-6, 6-3. He is now into another Grand Slam final. I think this is his 4th one in total. But yes, Chris, he did have a slight wobble in that 4th set, but I feel like maybe all the tennis that Mensik has played on court slightly caught up to him in this match.
I think so. He did look a little bit lower energy than he has done so far. I think that's fair to say at some points. But then we've seen that before. You know, he got bageled by Diminar after that monster match he had the round before, and I thought he's done here.
He's down and out.
Exactly, and then he came on and won many more rounds, and then made Fonseca look pretty run of the mill. So I wasn't thinking that it was going to be game over. I think when he had break points in that first set, I thought, here we go, this could be very interesting. And
do you think he needed that first set in order to sort of make the most of this?
I think so. And I think you've got to actually, get ahead in some of these big moments. I think it does have a huge impact on how the match will go. I mean, obviously, it's hard to break Sasha Zverev. He's got such a good serve. And, that's the story of the match, really, in terms of the serving statistics. I mean, he made 75% of first serves for Zverev, which is huge. He won almost 80% of those. And then on the second serve, it was 62%. So, I mean, he was really having a great service day. And if he serves like that, I mean, I think he's got one hand on the trophy, because sure, you might lose a set, but very unlikely that you're going to lose 3 sets and be broken, a lot of times during a match. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but the serve is the thing that's been getting him through. And I think that's probably the thing that he can rely on the most in some of these difficult matches.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always a good weapon for Zverev. I was interested today in actually both of their forehands, because they're very solid on their backhand wing, but I think a few times this season, particularly with Mensik, his forehand is the reason why he can at times be quite inconsistent. He can leak quite a few errors off of that wing, and I thought it was interesting today that it didn't feel like he was totally confident with his game from the back of the court. He was doing serve and volley at time, coming into the net, and that is not a place on the court that I necessarily associate with Jakub Mensik's A game. But I think, to Zverev's credit, I think he was just so strong that Mensik felt like maybe he needed to try and fight this in a different way, because Zverev's ground strokes were just doing so much damage throughout the match.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think, when players do mix up the play, it's because they also maybe need to for a reason, or it's a game plan. We saw it with Sinner when he was feeling it a little bit. He was going for, more serve volleys. It's quite textbook that you do see that. It's a little bit like you're out of ideas at times. Yes. And if you look at some of the rallies, Sasha was winning the longer rallies as well as the under 3-shot rallies. So I think you can kind of see that there was that risk that the longer the point goes on, the more likely it was that Zverev would win it. So I think it's not a bad tactic, but I think, pulling it out in a major semi-final for the first time might not be, it's a bit high risk, but it could be high reward.
He was definitely varying his style, because also he was bringing in the drop shot as well. I know John McEnroe on commentary was just saying, "Oh, he's knackered. He's going to the drop shot."
People say that as soon as someone hits one drop shot, right?
I know, but I think it was more like Zverev's game at the back is too solid today. I need to get him moving around. But I mean, just talking about that like third set blip from Zverev, is that a worry for him? Because he was on easy street. He was 2 sets up. He was coasting. And we've seen this again, time and time before in some of these really big matches he has, particularly at Grand Slams, where for whatever reason, he is on cruise control, or he is dominating the match, and he just lets his opponent back in. And it's usually, I feel, to do with more how Zverev is playing rather than his opponent.
I think that's fair. I think he doesn't always kind of close it out. I think players do get that extra chance against him. I also think in a couple of matches, it has looked like maybe he was going to, lose a first set. I think he was down a break in a few of his first sets this tournament. and he's managed to come through. So you could also argue that, there is some resilience there. I mean, he almost went down that break in the first set, in the eighth game, and then he was able to win it 7-5. So I think there will be ebbs and flows in matches. I think this one, there's no shame in losing a set to Jakub Mensik. That's not a bad result to come through in four. And I also think, when you look at his performances in general, the picture is very positive. I think there's a lot going on. If you think about the mental side of things right now, the pressure on him to finally get a slam in the best opportunity he's probably ever going to get in his career. I mean, that will be something that you'll be thinking about when you're 2 sets to love up. If it's ever going to affect you, it's when you start to close in on that finish line. And then he was able to regroup. So I kind of see it more as like a positive, that it wasn't a complete derailing, that he was able to get it back on track.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed with how he bounced back in that fourth set, because he has been in these situations and it's let him get the better of him. So he has been able to regroup. I mean, just before we look at the men's final, just a final word on Mensik. He said he had a great tournament. I feel like, we've spoken about this before. He's one of the more underserved teenagers, I think, on the tour, or young guns anyway, with, I think, Fonseca and Hodar, particularly this clay season, getting more plaudits. But do you think this result and sort of outlasting all of them, dispatching of Fonseca, do you think that will change anything in terms of how he's looked at in terms of the tennis landscape? And actually, he's on arguably a stronger footing than these two when it comes to Grand Slams. Or do you think nothing's changed and it'll still be, all eyes on Fonseca and Hodar with Mensik underneath?
I think the nature of like where Fonseca's from, the huge interest in tennis that does exist there, the passion, from Guga when he was able to do so much. I think big population, a star in the making. I think that's a recipe for huge success. And I've said before that, with Mensik, it's a thing where they are used to having good Czech players. I don't think there's going to be hysteria around it. I mean, every year a new Czech woman picks up a Wimbledon title. It's kind of, what I mean? It's kind of much more a normal thing there, and it's not a huge nation. So I hope that he's got more attention on an international scale, because I think his tennis does warrant that. And I actually think that this is a great springboard for him personally, because there were questions physically about how strong he was. And I think he's shown himself and proven maybe himself as well that he can go not just 5 sets, he can go, into places he never thought he would be able to get out of and still have a run. So just think about how much damage he can do if it's best of 3 sets and if we're on, grass. And I think it's going to be very exciting to see what he can do. So great tournament
I agree.
For him.
I think if there's one thing I've taken away from Mensik and this tournament, is that you can never count him out. You talk about that match with de Minaur, even here in the third set, he looked down and out against Zverev, and just from somewhere he was able to make make a good game of it. So yeah, very good from Jakub Mensik. But let's look at the final, because it is Zverev versus Cobolli. We will have a first-time Grand Slam champion, and it's quite an interesting backstory here, Chris, in terms of the head-to-head, because they have played each other on clay twice this season, and it is one apiece. Cobolli won in Munich, Zverev won in Madrid. So we've got the sort of the third part, the shootout, if you will, between the two of them. Where for you is this going to be won and lost? Because I can think about this in lots of different ways. Zverev, he's been here time and time again. Is that experience going to count? Is that going to hinder him? Is it going to bring up those negative experiences that he has felt? Is Cobolli going to be overawed by the occasion? Where's your head at in terms of this matchup?
I feel like Cobolli's very dangerous. I think he has a level that he can play when he's feeling good and when he's feeling it. I think it was a quarterfinal at Wimbledon where everyone was surprised by the level he was able to bring against Djokovic. It really was fantastic, and I think he has flashes like that. So I think it will be tricky, because when they are both playing well, I think probably that Cobolli can do the more inspired tennis in some ways. I'm not really saying it's like an Alcaraz-Sinner matchup, but you know what I mean? There's that level of flair versus, the sensibilities and the reliability of, Zverev's serve. But at the same time, the biggest question I have is over 5 sets. I think in a 3-set match, I think we've seen they tend to be straight sets when they've played in the past. Best of 5 sets, major final. I think it's all going to be between the ears is where this is going to be won and lost. And I think it will be how, Flavio rises to the occasion, whether he's one of those first-time finalists that really does believe that this could be their story, or if it's a case that it will be overawed by the occasion. And I think probably he won't be one of those finalists that's overawed by the occasion. But I do think for Zverev, I think he's got the game to win it. I think he's got the experience to win it, but I'm not sure he's got the head to see it through.
Well, interestingly, en route to the final, Cobolli has defeated 2 top 20 opponents. Zverev has not defeated anyone in the top 20 on this run. So I don't know if that is going to be a factor. But what I do know, Chris, and I think a lot of our listeners will be feeling this as well, and just kind of general tennis fans, is that there is this feeling with Zverev on social media. Anyone but Zverev messages and comments have been pretty popular. The more this tournament has gone on, the more other players around him have gone out, and that's because of the nature of his past. He's had allegations put against him that has kind of led to this sort of negative image that fans just can't get behind, like a Carlos Alcaraz or a Yannick Sinner. How do we process this? In terms of, it feels like quite a complicated situation that could potentially unfold if he becomes a Grand Slam champion.
I think, as you've said, like a lot of people will not be celebrating this because he's not particularly popular. And, arguably that's obviously from his own doing, as well as from the allegations that have been made about him by his previous partners that are pretty strong in nature in terms of accusations of, violence and things like that. That was settled outside of court and claims were never made by his first partner. When it comes to his behavior as well, he's not won fans from incidents such as when he was handed a maximum fine because he attacked the umpire's chair. I mean, he very almost hit the umpire, and then he did actually get a suspension for that. And he lost his prize money and ranking points from that tournament. And I mean, that doesn't win you fans, and it doesn't look good in the context of the allegations that have been made against him previously. So he's not a popular player, I think it's fair to say. But I can say from being at finals that he's played in Hamburg, in Germany, he is celebrated like a hero. So I don't think this is a universal thing. I think a lot of people, are not aware of this. So I think that on the media side of things and on the social media sphere is dominated by people who don't support him. But I think in the television viewing audience, a lot of people would not be aware of this and would think it's his time. They're very pleased for that. I think from our side on the podcast, we don't, we've always been transparent about what we think has gone on and what our views are on that. And we are not saying that he would be our favourite champion. But what I will say for sure is that the tennis that he's played in the past, the level that he showed and the consistency he's had at the top means that I think he's perfectly deserving and warranting of a Grand Slam. Whether that's popular or not, I think that's for the people to decide.
Okay, we're going to make some predictions now. I would like your winner between Zverev and Cobolli and number of sets.
Do I have to go first?
Okay, I will go first. I am going to say, I think it's going to be a slog. I think it's going to be tough. I think it's not going to be pretty at times. And I'm going to say it's Zverev in 5 sets.
I mean, all of the results point towards Zverev probably getting this, apart from what I've said about the mental side of things. But I think there's something about Flavio. We're in the tournament of upsets, and I don't want to spoil my prediction for the women's final, but I think is an upset even an upset now in this tournament? I feel like we should expect it. So I'm going to go Cobolli in 4.
Wow. Okay, interesting. Listeners, let us know your predictions.
I'm sure they will. Remember when we said Djokovic was going to beat Alcaraz in Australia, and then
I think the one thing I'll say is they're both going to be fresh and fit for this matchup. So
you're jinxing it.
I'm jinxing it already.
Maybe we should say, will this match even happen? Might be the question.
Okay, right. Let's swiftly move on before we wrap up. Day 14 is tomorrow. We've got the women's final, Hlinska versus Andreeva. Again, we're going to have a first-time Grand Slam champion. We didn't get your views last time on the pod because it was just being Kim. I've already said my 2 pence. Where's your views on this?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I've already said I'm in the mood of an upset. I feel like that's what's happening here. And I think everyone's kind of counting out Maya. And I think, well, she's just shown that she can win 9 matches in a row. There are some questions about her, physical side of things and whether she's ill or not. She practiced today. I'm all for the upset. I think she's going to win it. And I think she's going to win it in three. And I think her game is the exact sort of game that's going to frustrate Mira and Andreeva. So I think it's going to be another run like we've only ever seen once, like a Raducanu run. And I also just think like some of this, I know I didn't join the podcast yesterday, but there are some of these things, the stories that are coming out that I also just think, a big question could be around like what will she be wearing tomorrow as well, because she doesn't have a sponsor. So she was asked about why she was wearing all these different outfits. And she said, well, there isn't a story. The story is I'm not sponsored, so I'm just wearing clothes. So do we think she'll have bagged a sponsor by the final?
Oh, you would think so. You would hope so. Got to make the most of it. And interestingly, she said that she didn't think she had enough money to book a last-minute hotel room after reaching the semi-finals. So where's she sleeping before the final? I hope it's somewhere nice.
It's been sorted by Iga Świątek's main sponsor, which is a Polish brand that's energy drink. So she doesn't get paid the money until after the tournament, and she wasn't anticipating, a 3-week stint in Paris for her and her team. So they put up the money for it. So I think that's why she's wearing the badge on the thing. So either way, it's a fantastic...
So it was like, we'll give you a place to stay, but you need to put the badge on the shirt.
I mean, I would happily do that. We'd happily display it here if they'd like to sponsor us, right, Joel?
Yes, indeed. But we're going to wrap up our Roland Garros Day 13 catch-up here at Tennis Weekly HQ. We hope you've enjoyed the ride with us. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss a moment of action as we head into finals weekend in Paris. We are producing daily episodes across the fortnight. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and all your favourite podcasting platforms out there. And if you love what you're hearing, be sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, as well as hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube.
And you can stay connected with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, and Threads. The handle for all of those is Tennis Weekly Pod. Do let us know who you think is going to be the winner. We do have videos on YouTube where we encourage you to tell us what you think. You can also get in touch with us via email at tennisweeklypod@gmail.com or visit our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back on Saturday for our Roland Garros Day 14 catch-up, including the women's singles final. But until then, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Tennis Weekly.